Tonight on The Sleep Scientist, we drift into a forgotten valley, hidden beneath layers of time and mystery, a place where dinosaurs once dreamed beneath twin moons and glowing crystal skies. This gentle journey follows a young dino hatchling named Arlo and an ancient scientist named Mira, whose strange invention could whisper into the past. Together, across memories locked in stone and dreams written in starlight, they unravel the quiet magic of an era long gone, but not entirely lost. So curl up, breathe deeply, and let your thoughts grow soft as we step into a land where time slows, and ancient creatures dream once more beneath the canopy of forever night. The lanterns glow. In the heart of the forest, where the trees whispered secrets older than memory and the moonlight painted silver trails upon the mossy ground, stood a forgotten observatory. Wrapped in ivy and silence, it looked more like a fairy tale cottage than a place of science. Yet inside, surrounded by ancient star maps and half-finished experiments, lived Dr. Ilara Voss, the sleep scientist. Ilara had always worked at night. The stars were her companions, and the language of the universe spoke to her in the hush between heartbeats. But what fascinated her most wasn't just the stars, it was time. How it flowed. How it remembered. How it sometimes left traces in the smallest of places. One rainy evening, while cataloging old astronomical equipment in the basement archives, Ilara stumbled upon a dusty crate she'd never seen before. It was bound in leather and marked with the faded seal of the Lunar Research Guild, 1832. Her breath caught. With delicate fingers, she unlatched it and lifted the lid. Inside was a brass lantern, unlike any she'd ever seen. It was warm to the touch, though it hadn't been lit in centuries. Its glass was etched with spirals and symbols, constellations she couldn't name. And resting beside it was a note, yellowed with time. To light this lantern is to remember the earth as it was, and as it still dreams to be. That night, the rain fell heavier. Thunder rumbled like a giant turning in sleep. Ilara placed the lantern on her wooden desk and hesitated. Something in her heart, a mix of curiosity and caution, told her this was no ordinary relic. But the scientist in her couldn't resist. With a flick of her wrist, she struck a match and brought it close to the lantern's heart. A soft humph echoed through the observatory as a blue-green flame flickered to life. The air thickened, shimmering like heat on pavement. Her books began to ruffle. The globe spun slowly on its own. And then, silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but full, like a held breath. She looked up, and the observatory was gone. The desk was gone. The room was now a jungle. Towering ferns stretched toward a golden sky streaked with clouds. The air buzzed with the sound of distant insects and birds that didn't quite sound like birds. There was a deep hum beneath the earth, as if the planet itself was alive and whispering. Ilara's heart raced, not with fear, but wonder. And then, from beyond the trees, came a sound that sent chills down her spine. Thump. 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 Slow, steady footsteps. Not human. Heavy. Ground shaking. She turned slowly, and there it was. A colossal shadow moved through the trees, tall as the observatory roof, its tail sweeping leaves like a whispering broom. A dinosaur. A real one. A brachiosaurus, grazing on the canopy. Her lantern glowed brighter, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Was it guiding her? Protecting her? Or had it brought her here for a reason? Ilara stepped forward, barefoot in the prehistoric moss, and smiled. She wasn't just in the past. She was in Earth's dream. And the dream was just beginning. Footsteps through time. The forest floor was soft beneath Ilara's feet, warm, pulsing faintly, as though the earth itself were breathing. She moved slowly, cradling the time lantern in her hands. Its light glowed in gentle waves, casting turquoise ripples across the ferns and vines, revealing glimpses of this lost world. Around her, life unfolded in a symphony of forgotten sound. In the trees above, creatures glided silently, feathered reptiles with brilliant crests of red and gold. Strange flowers bloomed in spirals, exhaling a heady scent that shimmered in the air like dust from a dream. Every leaf, every chirp, every shift of wind was rich with detail, as if time here ran thicker, deeper. Elara's scientific mind was reeling. She was walking through the Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs. But this wasn't a cold museum or a simulation. This was real. The humidity on her skin, the chirr of insects larger than her hand, the thudding echo of titanic footsteps, it was all impossibly alive. She took out her notebook, a scientist's instinct, but the pages fluttered with a strange energy. The lantern, still glowing, seemed to hum with her thoughts. Words began to appear in glowing ink, written in her own handwriting, though she hadn't moved the pen. Time does not forget. It folds. It dreams. And sometimes, it invites us to walk through the fold. She blinked. The lantern pulsed once more. Suddenly, a rustle from the undergrowth froze her in place. From the foliage, a small creature peeked out, a young protoceratops, barely the size of a lamb, with soft, curved horns and bright, curious eyes. It sniffed the air, then took a few cautious steps toward her. Elara held her breath. It chirped, a high, warbling sound, and nudged the lantern with its snout. The lantern responded, flickering with gold light, and the little dinosaur blinked as if understanding something. Then it turned, and began walking away, looking back occasionally, as if beckoning her. With a mixture of awe and trust, Elara followed. They moved deeper into the forest, past bubbling streams and mossy stones etched with what looked like symbols. Not just natural erosion, these were shapes, spirals, constellations, carved into stone. Elara paused, tracing them gently. This place is more than just ancient, she thought. It's intelligent. The protoceratops chirped again, urging her on. Eventually, they came to a clearing. At its center was a stone circle, half buried by vines, and in its heart stood a pedestal, empty, except for an impression shaped like the base of her lantern. Elara approached, her fingers trembling. She placed the lantern into the stone groove, and the moment it touched, a soft chime rang through the trees. The ground beneath her shimmered. The trees bent slightly inward, as if listening. Then, like a projection unfolding from the lantern's core, a ghostly image appeared in the air above it, a sky map, glowing in blues and golds. It rotated slowly, showing constellations Elara had never seen. Galaxies unborn. A timeline, moving backward. And then, a voice. Not spoken aloud, but heard in her mind. The dream of Earth must be remembered. The creatures of before must not be forgotten. You, Elara Voss, are chosen to carry their memory forward. Her breath hitched. Learn their world. Protect their story. Time is listening. Then, silence. The lantern dimmed. The map faded. The little dinosaur nudged her hand gently, as if to say, "It's okay." Elara sank to her knees in the clearing, tears in her eyes. Not of fear, but of gratitude. The forest, the lantern, the creatures, they were entrusting her with something sacred. Not just a journey through time. But a mission. To be a dream keeper of the ancient world. To learn from the past, and whisper it gently to the future, like a comet across a night sky. The memory tree. The little protoceratops trotted ahead, its tail swaying like a metronome, guiding Elara deeper into the emerald heart of the prehistoric forest. The air shimmered with strange humidity, not hot, but thick with energy, as though the very molecules carried memory. Elara walked carefully, her boots pressing into a carpet of ancient moss. The lantern hung at her side now, dim but alive, like a heart beating to a rhythm she hadn't yet understood. Behind her, the stone circle was fading into shadow, as if the forest was gently closing one page of the story and turning to the next. The forest opened again. Before her stood a massive tree, unlike anything she had seen on Earth or in science journals. Its bark was silvery and smooth, yet pulsing faintly with pale blue light, and its branches reached far into the sky, leaves shaped like tiny galaxies. Elara stepped forward, captivated. The little dinosaur let out a soft purr and sat beside the roots. She approached the trunk. It was warm to the touch, like skin. And the moment her fingers brushed its surface, the tree responded. From deep within, a soft vibration moved up through her hand and into her chest. Her vision blurred, the forest vanished, and then she was standing in light. Not ordinary light, but a glowing, living archive of time. Around her shimmered a memory field, like being inside a mind. Scenes bloomed before her, herds of Brachiosaurus moving through the mist, flocks of colorful microraptors dancing between volcanoes, a nest of eggs cradled in soft sand beneath a twilight moon. She wasn't just watching, she was feeling their world. Their fears, their joy, their instinct to live, to survive, to evolve. She felt the thump of an ankylosaurus as it defended its young. She soared with a pterosaur above oceans no human had named. She heard the booming call of a distant, unseen creature that made the forest tremble like thunder. And all the while, the lantern at her side gently glowed, recording. Translating. Not words, but emotions. Stories told through sensations. A language of memory. Then a whisper, once more, in her mind. This is the memory tree. Planted by time. Rooted in dream. Only those chosen may see what lies within. Elara's breath caught. You are now the keeper of stories. Forgotten. The lost experiments. The quiet triumphs. The silent extinctions. Remember for us. Then the light dimmed, folding like petals, and she was back in the clearing. The little dinosaur pressed its head gently into her knee. She looked down at it, her voice barely a whisper. Are you, my guide? The creature chirped, almost proudly. Then the lantern glowed once more, brighter this time, and the tree began to shift. From its base emerged a winding staircase of root and bark, spiraling downward into the earth. Beneath the memory tree, there was something more. A chamber. A secret. A question left by time itself. Elara felt her heart quicken. The journey wasn't just across time, it was into its deepest chambers. And something, or someone, was waiting. She tightened her satchel, took one last look at the daylight, then began to descend into the glowing spiral. Beneath the roots of memory, into the core of the ancient dream. Beneath the roots of time. The staircase wound deeper, spiraling like a strand of ancient DNA. Each step glowed softly beneath Elara's boots, not from any lamp or fire, but from the roots themselves, veins of bioluminescence, pulsing slowly like a slumbering heartbeat. The lantern at her side shimmered in rhythm, glowing a shade of moonlit amber. She had no idea how far down she was going. There was no sense of time in this spiral. Just the hush of earth, the comfort of moss-lined walls, and the soft, curious chirps of the little dinosaur trailing close behind her. And then, the stair ended. She stepped onto a smooth stone floor that hummed beneath her feet. The chamber was vast, a subterranean vault, hidden beneath the memory tree. The ceiling arched high above her like a cathedral made from ancient stone and twisted root. Etched along every surface were glowing carvings, creatures, constellations, spirals, and symbols that pulsed faintly, as if breathing with thought. At the chamber's center stood a pedestal, circular, crystalline, and humming. Hovering above it, spinning slowly in midair, was a glowing orb, not quite glass, not quite light. Within it shimmered miniature galaxies, swirling gently, like a message caught in a dream. As Elara approached, the lantern grew bright, brighter than she had ever seen. And then, the orb spoke. Not in words. But in pictures. Scenes unfolded in the air above it. A meteor crashing into a lush green world. Dinosaurs scattering beneath falling ash. A small creature burrowing underground to survive. Time passing. Ice. Fire. Stars being born. Machines orbiting a pale blue dot. Human hands reaching toward the stars. Elara stood breathless. It was the timeline of Earth. But not from a book or a simulation, this was alive. The orb was a time archive, recording all the experiments of life, not from one species or era, but from the perspective of the planet itself. And there, glowing within the archive, she saw something new, herself. Walking with the lantern. Touching the memory tree. Descending into this place. She was now part of the archive. Time is not a river, the orb whispered gently, its voice like the wind through leaves. It is a garden. And you are the new caretaker. The orb descended, slowly placing itself into the center of the lantern. It clicked softly, and then the whole chamber shifted. Walls glowed brighter, the carvings shimmered, and the chamber responded to her presence like a living library. The little protoceratops chirped twice and tapped its foot. Behind the pedestal, a door began to open, tall, carved with stars, and lined with the image of a spiral galaxy. Beyond it, Elara glimpsed something incredible. A valley. Not just prehistoric. But scattered with strange artifacts, metallic and moss-covered. Ancient bones beside glowing machines. Dinosaurs wandering calmly through ruins of impossible origin. The forgotten crosspoint where evolution and intelligence once touched, and something beautiful was left behind. This was no ordinary time. This was the lost epoch. And Elara, lantern glowing bright, took her first step into it. The experiment was just beginning. The Valley of Forgotten Light. Elara stepped through the carved stone doorway as if crossing into a memory the world itself had long forgotten. The air shifted, warm and rich with the scent of damp ferns, strange blossoms, and something faintly metallic, like old starlight caught in moss. She had entered the Valley of Forgotten Light. It stretched wide beneath a sky that shimmered with two suns, one gold, one soft blue, though Elara knew it couldn't be real. This place existed between times. A hidden fold where prehistoric Earth, lost knowledge, and the dreams of extinct creatures all gathered like forgotten thoughts in the corners of the universe. Towering ferns brushed her shoulders. Giant flowers turned toward her lantern's glow. Trees older than language arched high above her, their trunks inscribed with spiral runes that seemed to pulse softly when she passed. She felt not like a visitor, but like the valley had been waiting for her. And then she saw them. Dinosaurs, not as wild beasts, but as gentle guardians of this place. A long-necked sauropod grazed beside a waterfall of light. Feathered theropods chirped high in the branches. A pair of triceratops watched her with deep, intelligent eyes. There was no fear. No threat. The creatures here were aware, not quite human, not quite animal. Something in between. Suddenly, the lantern flickered. And at her feet, the soil shimmered like glass. A new vision formed. A tall structure, half-buried, covered in vines and moss, rose before her in the vision. It pulsed with the same light as the time lantern. Beneath it, she saw circles, devices, and beams of energy reaching skyward. A signal. And in her ears, the faint echo of voices, not human. Ancient, melodic, curious. The dinosaurs had been trying to communicate. Not through words or noise, but through light, memory, and patterns etched into time itself. Elara's heart trembled with awe. What if extinction, she whispered, was not the end, but the pause before something else? The protoceratops beside her chirped and darted toward a mossy hill, calling her. With the lantern still glowing from within, Elara followed, and soon found herself facing the ruins of the structure from her vision. Vines curled around broken arches. Crystals jutted from the stone, humming quietly. At its heart was a circle carved deep into the stone floor. Symbols surrounded it: stars, moons, dinosaur footprints, spirals, and strange patterns that matched the glowing core of her lantern. It was a communication chamber. And the time lantern was the missing key. Elara stepped into the center. The moment she did, the valley held its breath. Dinosaurs turned. Leaves stilled. The air shimmered. She raised the lantern high, and the chamber lit up with soft pulses of memory and light. One by one, holographic shapes formed in the air, maps of stars, time loops, forgotten experiments. And in their midst, a question. Not from her. But from them. From creatures long gone, but not lost. Are you ready to remember what we began, together? Elara closed her eyes, heart full, lantern glowing like a miniature sun. And softly, she answered. Yes. The memory echoes. The circular chamber pulsed with ancient energy. As Elara stood within its center, her lantern rose slowly into the air, gently drawn upward by an invisible force. Beams of light laced with symbols spun around her, softly humming like lullabies from a forgotten universe. She was no longer in a place of stone and moss. The moment she whispered, yes, the air shifted again. The walls faded into soft stardust. The floor beneath her feet turned translucent, revealing endless layers of memory, epochs layered like pages in a book written not in words, but in light and life. Then came the first echo. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling, a wave of warmth and wonder, followed by shapes forming in the light. Dinosaurs, millions of them, moving through lush green worlds, not only surviving but thriving with intention. Elara saw them building great crystalline structures with their claws, digging canals that glowed with bioluminescent algae, and mapping constellations with stones and feathers. These weren't mindless beasts of Earth's ancient past. They were scientists. Artists. Dreamers. And they had left behind messages, not in fossils or bones, but in encoded pulses scattered across time. Messages only someone holding the time lantern could one day hear. And Elara was hearing them now. We knew our time would pass, came a voice, not spoken, but felt. But we believed in cycles. In discovery. In return. One image held steady now, projected before her in shimmering detail. A comet, not made of ice and dust, but crystal and circuitry, living memory drifting through space. The dinosaurs hadn't just vanished. They had sent something away. A piece of themselves. Launched during the final days of their age, a last experiment. And now, it was coming back. Elara's eyes widened. She whispered, the comet. It's whispering because it remembers. Suddenly, a glowing spiral on the chamber wall pulsed. The dinosaurs outside stirred. They felt it too. The comet was drawing closer. Not to destroy, but to awaken. They were never trying to survive extinction, Elara murmured. They were trying to outlive it. In that moment, the time lantern dimmed. The projection faded. The air returned to the gentle hush of the forested valley. Leaves rustled. A feathered raptor blinked at her and then, very gently, bowed its head. And for the first time, Elara bowed back. She wasn't here to study dinosaurs. She was here to join them. To help finish what they began. And far above, beyond the clouds and canopy, a pale glimmer traced across the sky, the comet. Closer than ever. The comet's secret. Night had deepened across the valley, casting the ancient forest in moonlight and silver shadows. Elara sat at the edge of a high ridge, the time lantern resting quietly in her lap. The dinosaurs, her companions now, moved gently below, some resting beneath glowing ferns, others curled near hot springs that shimmered with starlight. It was all quiet, but it wasn't still. Something had changed. Above her, streaking ever so faintly through the sky, was the comet, no longer a distant light. It was nearer now, glowing brighter with each hour, pulsing with that soft hum only she could hear. But Alara wasn't afraid. She had begun to understand. The dinosaurs hadn't been left behind by time. They had stepped out of it, into hidden folds of space and memory, waiting for a time when someone would come with a mind gentle enough to listen and a heart wide enough to believe. The time lantern flickered once more. And then it spoke again, not in words, but in images. This time, it showed her a laboratory, vast and shimmering, deep beneath what looked like the Earth's crust. Dinosaurs of all kinds moved within it, towering sauropods with bioluminescent scales operating delicate machines, raptors crafting light maps that swirled like galaxies, and triceratops elders engraving glyphs into glowing stone tablets. They were building something. Alara saw blueprints of crystalline structures shaped like towers, or antennas, or receivers. Receivers for memory. Receivers for the comet. "We couldn't stop the sky from falling," came the familiar voice, full of grace and sorrow. "But we could leave ourselves in its path." The comet was not just a vessel, it was a vault. A seed of their civilization hurled into the cosmos as Earth began to change. Now, it was returning. And the dinosaurs, hidden in this deep fold of time, had awakened because their final experiment was nearing its return. Alara felt a soft nudge on her shoulder. She turned to see a young, feathered creature, the same one who had first guided her through the forest. It gently offered her a stone, smooth, warm, and etched with swirling spirals. The symbol of the comet. The creature looked up at the stars, then back at Alara. It was time. Together, they descended into the valley, where the others were gathering, under the comet's light, under the pull of memory. The forest was no longer a place of hiding. It was becoming a launch site. And somewhere, far above, the stars whispered softly to each other, as if remembering something too. The vault beneath the earth. The soft light of morning hadn't yet touched the sky, but deep beneath the forest floor, time moved differently. Alara stood at the mouth of a cave, one that hadn't existed the night before. The dinosaurs, guided by some ancient memory or signal, had led her here as the comet's glow pulsed above them like a silent heartbeat. Inside the cave, the walls shimmered with crystal veins, clear, humming, and alive with the same gentle frequency that came from the time lantern. Each pulse seemed to unlock a little more of the air itself, as though the chamber was remembering how to breathe. Alara stepped in, lantern in hand. The air grew warmer, thicker. She could feel the presence of things not just ancient, but waiting. The corridor opened into a vast chamber. And there, suspended in the middle of the space, was the vault. It looked like a planet cracked open, an orb of stone and light, floating mid-air, encased in rings that turned slowly with perfect rhythm. Glyphs glowed across the surface, and Alara instinctively placed the lantern against one of them. The vault responded. It opened. Inside was a library, but not one of books. These were memory crystals. Thousands. Each humming with light. Each holding voices, stories, discoveries. The entire legacy of a civilization that had not gone extinct, but had chosen to sleep. She picked up the first crystal. It whispered. Experiment 1112A, converting time into material memory. Host, Triceran Elder Council. Result, partial success. Memory seeded into Comet Vault. She picked up another. Experiment 3209C, Dream State Communication with Future Sentient Beings. Hypothesis, consciousness is a bridge. Awaiting receiver. Tears welled up in Alara's eyes. Not out of sorrow, but out of wonder. These weren't animals who had vanished. These were scientists. Dreamers. Explorers of consciousness and time. They hadn't disappeared, they had waited. And now they had chosen her. Behind her, the dinosaurs stood in silence. As though remembering everything at once. The vault glowed brighter. Outside, the comet grew closer. There wasn't much time. But Elara understood now, she wasn't meant to preserve their past. She was meant to help wake it. The awakening field. The vault had opened. And something ancient had begun to stir. Elara held the crystal in her trembling hands, its light dancing across her face like starlight reflected in still water. Around her, the memory chamber hummed louder now, no longer a whisper of the past, but a rising harmony calling toward something alive. She looked back at the creatures who had brought her here, majestic, gentle dinosaurs standing motionless at the chamber's edge. Their eyes, glowing faintly with the same pale shimmer as the vault, held a knowing calm. Not fear. Not confusion. They remembered. One of the crystals pulsed brighter than the rest, rising into the air and projecting a soft vision, an ancient city, not made of concrete or metal, but of living stone and luminous vines, woven through with the language of light. In that city, the elder dinosaurs had once gathered beneath a tree whose leaves shimmered with memory. They had foreseen the comet's coming, not as an end, but as a beginning. They had placed their wisdom, their science, their dreams into crystals and hidden them deep beneath the earth. And they had waited, for someone who could hear their thoughts. For someone like Elara. Suddenly, the chamber dimmed as the comet passed directly overhead. Its presence pressed against the vault like a heartbeat, thump, thump, thump. The energy surged. The crystals lifted higher. A voice, gentle and vast, spoke through the lantern. Dreamer. Sleeper. Rememberer. You hold the key. The awakening begins with your choice. Elara stepped into the circle of crystals. The ground vibrated softly. The dinosaurs moved forward, each one placing a paw, a claw, a scaled foot into the glowing ring of light. The field surged. The comet's energy poured down through the earth like liquid aurora. And the vault began to sing. Each dinosaur shimmered. Their colors brightened. Their eyes shone with distant stars. They weren't beasts of the past, they were beings of science, of memory, of purpose. They had used sleep to protect time itself. And now they were ready to rise. But it would take more than crystals and comets. It would take trust. Elara looked up, her heart quiet, her breath soft. I'm ready, she whispered. The vault opened completely. And the awakening began. The star map beneath their feet. The vault's hum faded into a shimmering stillness. For a moment, it felt like time had paused, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Then the floor beneath Elara's feet began to shift. Not in fear or collapse, but like the turning of a page. The stone tiles glowed faintly, forming glowing lines that spidered outward into patterns, loops, spirals, constellations. A map. Elara stepped back, awestruck, as the entire floor of the chamber revealed itself not just as a memory vault, but as a star map. And not just the sky above, but the ancient sky. One from millions of years ago. This is where they came from, Elara murmured. The dinosaurs, the sentient ones, gathered around the map like monks before a sacred scroll. Each one touched a glowing point with a claw or snout, activating constellations in soft pulses. Elara realized they weren't just showing where they had come from, they were marking a route. The comet was not an accident. It was a beacon. A traveler. And now it had returned. The time lantern flared again in her hand. This time, it didn't just glow, it projected an image above the map, a cluster of stars spinning slowly, orbiting a single golden sun. Around it, a planet blinked, pale blue, like Earth, but surrounded by rings of crystalline satellites. One of the elder dinosaurs turned to her and blinked, a deep, intelligent gesture. That's where you're going, isn't it? Elara whispered. The vault responded. Panels opened from the chamber's edge, revealing technology, ancient, organic, and glowing with a power she could barely comprehend. vines wrapped around what looked like seed-shaped pods, stasis ships. They had once used these to travel between stars. And they were preparing them again. Not to escape Earth, but to invite Elara and others to join them in a dream long left unfinished. The comet was not a warning. It was an invitation. To a lost civilization that never truly vanished, only waited. And now that the time lantern had been awakened, Earth would no longer sleep alone. The decision tree. The chamber pulsed with soft, ancient light, and the air buzzed gently, not with electricity, but with something older. Something wiser. Elara stood at the heart of it all, surrounded by ancient beings who had lived before humanity had even dreamed of fire. They had not vanished, they had waited. For this moment. The time lantern floated before her now, detached from gravity, spinning slowly like a planet. It cast soft lights into the surrounding darkness, creating visions, glimpses of the journey ahead. One showed a crystalline city hovering above a forest moon. Another showed dinosaur-like beings walking alongside strange glowing flora, not Earth's, but not hostile. And one vision showed Earth itself, wrapped in starborn vines and encircled by a golden energy, as if it, too, was preparing to bloom again. Why now? Elara asked quietly. The elder dinosaur, with eyes full of galaxies, stepped forward. From a crest atop his head, tiny sparks floated, messages, memories. She understood, through feeling, not words. Because now, humans were ready to listen. The stasis pods behind her whispered softly, opening with a sigh like wine through old trees. She stepped forward, heart pounding. She had studied the stars her whole life. Now, they were inviting her in. But staying meant returning to the world she knew, to tell the story. Leaving meant leaping into the unknown, into a voyage millions of years in the making. The forest above the chamber swayed with the wind of unseen forces, as if it, too, were waiting on her choice. And then a voice, not human, not dinosaur, echoed from the time lantern. One step forward, and time will fold for you. Elara's fingers hovered near the pod's glowing edge. And slowly, with a breath filled with both fear and wonder, she stepped forward. The chamber sealed behind her like a blooming flower. A soft pulse. A golden spark. And she was gone. Gone, but not lost. Just, traveling. The Starborn Valley. At first, there was only silence. Not the silence of sleep or night, but the deep, layered silence of space. A hush woven with age and wonder. Then, slowly, the sound of water. Not waves or rain, but soft, melodic trickles, like silver thread flowing through a crystal harp. Elara opened her eyes. Above her, the sky was not black, but a soft lavender hue, glowing faintly as if illuminated by a hidden moon. 3 suns floated at different edges of the sky, casting no harsh shadows, only warm halos of peace. She sat up slowly. She was lying in a field of luminous moss, green and gold, shifting gently beneath her fingertips like fur. All around her, towering trees arched high into the air, their trunks spiraled like galaxies, their leaves shimmering with colors she couldn't name. But it was the sound that moved her most. A low, rhythmic thrum pulsed from the earth, like a heartbeat. Not mechanical. Not artificial. Alive. And then, movement. From behind a glowing fern, a creature stepped into view. It was massive, easily 20 feet tall, but it moved with grace. Its skin was sleek and patterned with star-like freckles. Its eyes were ancient and calm. It was a dinosaur. But not like those in textbooks. It looked, evolved. Gentle. A being of thought and light. And behind it, more came. Dozens. Tall and small, winged and horned, glowing and grounded. They gathered not with fear, but with recognition. One of them, the same elder from the chamber, stepped forward. He touched the ground with one clawed hand, and from the earth rose a glowing vine, curling into a shape, a circle with a star in the center. Elara recognized it from her dreams. "Welcome to the Starborn Valley," the elder said, his voice a blend of echo and wind. "We've been waiting." Elara stepped forward, breath catching in her throat. Where am I?" The elder smiled, not with lips, but with light in his eyes. "You are in the place between what was, and what can be." And then the stars began to fall, not crashing, but gently descending like golden snow. Around her, the dinosaurs lifted their heads and hummed a low, ancient melody. A greeting. A memory. A homecoming. The Dream Keepers. Long version. The night in the hidden valley had a softness to it, as if time itself was catching its breath. Above, stars shimmered in a velvet sky, and beneath them, the quiet presence of the dinosaurs surrounded Elara in a circle of ancient wonder. The air smelled of warm earth, blooming moss, and something that felt like starlight. Elara stood at the center, holding the softly glowing time lantern, its light flickering like a memory trying to awaken. Each pulse from it seemed to echo inside her chest, not with fear, but with anticipation, like the feeling before remembering something long forgotten. The elder dinosaur stepped forward. He was majestic, tall as a tree, with a frill that shimmered in hues of dusk and a gaze full of knowing. When he spoke, his voice wasn't sound, but sensation, like wine through leaves and the hush of falling snow. "You have crossed the lines of time not with force, but with wonder," he said. "Few dreamers find their way here." Elara blinked, hardly breathing. "What is this place?" she whispered. "Who are you?" The elder's tail brushed gently across the soil, drawing glowing patterns in the dirt, spirals, stars, trees, and lanterns. "This is the Valley of Memory," he replied. "And we are the Dream Keepers, those who remember what the world forgot." He gestured toward the other dinosaurs. Some were towering sauropods with eyes like moons, others were swift, feathered creatures with glows in their throats like living lanterns. Each stood silent, watching, yet peaceful, guardians of something sacred. The time lantern in Elara's hand shimmered suddenly, and from its center, threads of golden light spun outward, projecting dream images into the air around them. Elara gasped as the valley was bathed in glowing memories. A vision of dinosaurs sitting beside human children, tracing stars into sand. Great libraries carved into the walls of glowing caves. A sky filled with shimmering comets that sang in tones only dreamers could hear. And then, the earth shaking, the skies dimming, and time folding in on itself like a book being shut too soon. The elder spoke again. "There was a time when we shared the world. We were not beasts, we were teachers, explorers, scientists of soul and sky. But the world changed. Memory grew fragile. Humans forgot. The images faded, and a hush fell over the valley. So we hid," said a gentle, silver-feathered dinosaur beside him. "We stepped outside the river of time, into pockets where stories still breathe. And we waited for someone who still believed." Elara's breath caught in her throat. "You waited for me?" "Not just you," the elder said, "but any child of stardust who still listened to the night sky, who still believed science and wonder were not enemies, but friends." The time lantern glowed brighter, and Elara felt something stir inside her, as if all her dreams, her questions, her childhood wonder were waking up. "What do I do now?" she asked. The elder raised his head toward the stars. "You remember. You carry this story back to the waking world. Because the time of returning is near." Above them, the stars began to shift. One comet, bright and slow, curved across the heavens, then paused directly above the valley. It began to descend, shimmering with colors not seen in waking life. It hovered above the valley's heart like a lantern of its own. The elder's voice turned soft, reverent. "That is the comet of memory. It returns once every 1,000 years to awaken the dream keepers. It is the bridge between time and what lies beyond. Suddenly, the time lantern in Alara's hand burst with warmth. Its light reached up and touched the comet. And from the comet, a staircase of light began to form, step by glowing step, stretching up into the sky like a spiral made of stars. Alara turned to the elder, breathless. "Where does it go?" He smiled gently. "To the place where stories are born, and where yours will continue." As Alara stepped forward, the dinosaurs bowed their heads. She looked up at the staircase, her heart full of awe. The stars were calling. And this time, she was ready to answer. The staircase of stars. The first step shimmered beneath Alara's foot like moonlight trapped in glass. As she placed her weight on it, the staircase held firm, solid yet soft, like stardust that had decided to become real for her alone. The dinosaurs watched in reverent silence from the valley below, their eyes reflecting the staircase's silver glow. Above, the comet of memory pulsed gently in the sky, waiting. The glowing steps spiraled upward, disappearing into the heavens like a dream climbing into morning. Alara glanced back one last time. The valley of memory was still, wrapped in ancient quiet. The elder dinosaur raised his tail in farewell, not a goodbye, but a promise. A promise that the story wasn't ending, only changing shape. As Alara ascended, each step gave off a gentle hum, like notes from an invisible lullaby. She passed through layers of sky. First, the blue haze of atmosphere, where clouds curled like sleepy thoughts. Then into the twilight band, where the last touch of earth met the velvet of space. And then, silence. But it wasn't empty. She floated now among the stars. Around her, constellations bloomed like flowers made of memory. They whispered secrets as she passed, stories woven into the sky itself. One shaped like a great spiral galaxy told of ancient starfaring whales. Another, shaped like a bird, whispered tales of time-traveling song. At the top of the staircase, a platform awaited, circular, carved of crystal, and gently spinning among the stars. Upon it stood something strange and wonderful. A clock made of light. Its hands moved not by ticking, but by memory. Each time it turned, the stars around it shifted, and Alara could hear echoes, giggles of ancient children, the rustling pages of dream books, the song of dinosaurs who once sang to the moon. Hovering above the clock was a figure, not human, not dinosaur, but something in between. It shimmered with wings like nebulae and eyes like old libraries. "You've come far, dream scientist," it said in a voice like wine through old pages. "Few remember the path. Fewer still believe it leads anywhere." Alara held out the time lantern, and it pulsed an answer. "I don't know everything," she admitted. "But I remember enough to keep going." The figure smiled. "That is the gift of dreamers. The memory of stars stitched into mortal hearts." It motioned to the space around her, and suddenly, the stars rearranged themselves into a story map, glowing dots forming timelines, possibilities, forgotten worlds. Alara stared, eyes wide. "What is this place?" "This is the Celestial Archive," the figure replied. "The place where all possible stories are stored, those lived, those dreamt, and those yet to be told." The time lantern in Alara's hand shimmered and rose from her fingers, floating into the air. From it, a stream of golden light poured outward, connecting to the archive. The lantern had become a key. "You brought a lost memory back into the weave," the figure said. "The time of forgetting is ending. And a new chapter is ready." Alara took a deep breath. "What do I do now?" "You choose. You write. You remember forward." And with that, the stars opened, forming a new portal, shaped like a swirling doorway made of light and leaves and fossils and stars. The next world was waiting. Alara stepped forward, the scent of ancient forests and cosmic ink in her breath. The garden where time grows. The portal pulsed like a heartbeat, ancient, slow, and steady, as Elara stepped through. For a breathless moment, she felt herself being pulled apart and sewn back together with threads of starlight and moss. When she opened her eyes, she found herself standing in a forest unlike any she had ever seen. It was dusk here, not because the sun was setting, but because the air itself was tinted with twilight, as if the hour had chosen to stay soft and golden forever. Around her, trees with spiral trunks reached into the sky. Their leaves were translucent like dragonfly wings, each shimmering with colors that shifted depending on where she stood. Beneath them grew vines made of time itself, their blossoms opening and closing to rhythms only the universe could count. This was the Chrono Garden. The ground beneath her feet was soft and springy, like walking on pages of old books. Flowers bloomed that whispered lullabies, and bees the size of pebbles hummed in loops, leaving glowing trails in the air. Elara noticed that wherever she walked, tiny lights followed, memories waking up. Ahead, a path of floating stepping stones led her deeper into the forest. Each stone showed a different image when she stepped onto it. A mother dinosaur teaching her hatchlings to hum to the moon. A young scientist scribbling on a scroll beneath a starflower tree. A comet sailing low over a field where dreams once danced. And then, a tree with a face opened its eyes. "You've brought the lantern," it rumbled, voice thick with age. And with it, a choice. Elara stepped closer. The tree's bark was marked with tiny fossil-like patterns, spirals, wings, even tiny dino feet. "What kind of choice?" she asked gently. The tree stretched a branch toward a crystal basin filled with water that shimmered like a mirror wrapped in moonlight. "In this garden," it said, "every path not taken grows into something new. If you wish, you may see what the world would be, if dinosaurs had never disappeared." Elara's breath caught. "You mean, a world where they're still here? With us?" "Yes," said the tree. "But seeing it will change you. Memory once planted cannot be uprooted." Elara hesitated, then nodded. "I came to remember forward." "Show me." She peered into the basin. At first, only ripples. Then, images bloomed. Cities where dinosaurs and humans lived side by side, stone and crystal buildings grown around living trees. Children riding on gentle giants to floating schools. Skyships shaped like pterosaurs gliding between clouds. Dinosaurs painting with their tails. Humans listening, learning, harmonizing with the rhythm of the old earth. And then, silence. The vision faded, and Elara was left trembling, tears on her cheeks, not of sadness, but of awe. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "So different, and yet, so right." The tree nodded slowly. "You can carry this vision with you, dream scientist. Share it. Shape the waking world with it." Elara touched the time lantern at her side. It glowed not just with memory now, but with hope. A path unfolded ahead, one lined with stars growing like wildflowers. She stepped forward. The Chrono Garden behind her shimmered in approval. And far away, in the heart of the comet's trail, something ancient stirred, waiting for Elara's next move. The bone library beneath the stars. Elara followed the glittering path from the Chrono Garden into a grove where moonlight never touched the ground. The time lantern pulsed softly at her side, lighting the way as the trees grew closer together, ancient, towering, and cloaked in moss like green velvet. As she walked, the sound of the world changed. The rustling of leaves quieted. Her footsteps stopped echoing. Even the wind hushed, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Then, she saw it. A spiral staircase of fossilized wood, spiraling downward into the earth, not carved, but grown. Vines pulsed softly with bioluminescent light, guiding her deeper into the roots of the world. She descended slowly. And there, hidden beneath the forest's heart, lay the bone library. Not a place of dust and books, but a cathedral made entirely of memory and marrow. Enormous ribs of long-lost dinosaurs arched overhead like vaults of a forgotten temple. Each bone hummed with stored knowledge, resonating with secrets only time could remember. "You've come far," said a voice, gentle, old, and echoing like a song trapped in stone. Elara turned. From between two towering femurs stepped a being shaped from swirling mist and fossil dust, a librarian of the lost. Its eyes were deep as galaxies, and its hands moved like shadow puppets against candlelight. "What is this place?" Elara asked, her voice a whisper. "It is the archive of extinction," the librarian replied. "Every species that ever was, and could be, is remembered here." It led her past aisles of bones floating in the air, each one playing soft sounds, whistles, songs, growls, lullabies of vanished creatures. Some skeletons were known: Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Tyrannosaurus. But others were not. "These never made it into your world," said the librarian. "They belong to possible futures." Elara stopped before a delicate creature, winged like a bat, scaled like a fish, with feathers that shimmered in invisible colors. This was a sky messenger, the librarian said. They might have been humanity's first stargazers, had the comet passed by. Elara's heart ached. So many might have beens. So many threads cut short. She turned to the librarian. "Can we bring them back? Through science, through stories, through memory?" The librarian paused. Then it walked toward a dais at the center of the chamber. There lay a bone carved with symbols glowing with starlight. "This," it said, "is a memory key. If you take it, you may unlock one forgotten truth from the past. One, but only one. Choose carefully." Elara's hand hovered over the key. Behind her, the lantern flickered, urging her to remember. To wonder. To hope. She thought of the children who would listen to her stories. She thought of a world that still held space for the extinct, the imagined, and the nearly forgotten. Then she touched the bone. And everything shifted. For one heartbeat, she stood in the very moment the comet arrived, watching the sky burn with silence, watching the dinosaurs look up not with fear, but with understanding. As if they had known. As if they had chosen to whisper their legacy into the soil, into the bones, into the dreams of future beings. When she opened her eyes again, the library was silent. But the lantern burned brighter than ever. And etched into its glass was a new pattern, a spiral of stardust and scales. Elara knew what it meant. She hadn't just remembered the dinosaurs. She had become their messenger. The observatory of soft moons and silent bones. The path out of the bone library wound upward like a silver ribbon curling through time. Elara followed it, the memory key gently glowing in her pocket and the time lantern now heavier, not in weight, but in meaning. With every step, she felt a strange tug in her chest, as if the world itself had become more alive, more ancient, more awake. As she rose through the moss-veiled trees, a pale blue light flickered in the distance, a shimmer, almost like starlight spilled onto the forest floor. She followed it. At the edge of a cliff, hidden by vines and the patient erosion of millennia, stood an old observatory, crumbling yet magnificent. Its silver dome was cracked open like an eggshell, and vines had wrapped themselves around its columns like guardians who had waited centuries in silence. "This must be where the sky remembers," Elara whispered. She stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and moonlight. The walls were lined with faded star charts, not just of constellations, but of dinosaur migrations mapped across prehistoric skies. Paintings showed a world where dinosaurs had built stone circles to observe eclipses, where they had lifted their faces to the stars not in fear, but in awe. In the center stood a telescope. Unlike any she had ever seen. It wasn't made of metal and glass, but of fossilized bone, shaped and polished with impossible precision. The barrel of the scope was a hollowed dinosaur femur, the lens shimmered with layers of crystal grown in zero gravity. And its base pulsed faintly, alive, waiting. The memory key vibrated in her pocket. Slowly, reverently, Elara placed the key into a socket near the telescope's eyepiece. The observatory seemed to exhale. The dome groaned and shifted. The telescope turned on its own, pointing not to Earth's sky, but to a fold in space that shouldn't exist, a soft place where the universe hummed a lullaby older than stars. She peered into the eyepiece. And gasped. She wasn't seeing stars. She was seeing memories, drifting through the void like glowing jellyfish. Moments from the lives of dinosaurs, preserved in threads of ancient light. A mother hadrosaur singing to her young beneath a sky filled with auroras. A group of long-necked sauropods tracing constellations with their tails in the sand. A feathered raptor placing smooth stones around a fallen sibling, not as defense, but as tribute. They were never just beasts, Elara whispered. They were astronomers. Dreamers. Poets. And just then, something stirred. Far beyond the telescope's reach, in that quiet wrinkle of space, a faint, spiraling light pulsed once. Twice. A third time. Elara's breath caught. That's a response. But from whom? Were the dinosaurs' dreams still alive somewhere in the cosmos? Had something, or someone, preserved their stories, waiting for a mind open enough to listen? As she stepped back from the telescope, the entire observatory shifted around her, walls fading into mist, the bones glowing brighter, the dome stretching like a dream. The time lantern pulsed warm in her hand. And on the telescope's lens, a message appeared, not written, but felt. You are not the end of our story. You are the turning page. Elara stood still for a long moment, heart full, soul lit. Then she smiled. The stars were no longer silent. And the past was no longer gone. The valley of echoing footsteps. The wind had changed. Elara noticed it the moment she stepped beyond the observatory ruins. It wasn't just the usual breeze that whispered through forest canopies, this one carried weight, memory, resonance. It brushed against her ears like distant thunder muffled beneath a lullaby. She descended into a hollow where the earth had caved long ago, forming a quiet basin ringed with colossal tree ferns and glowing fungi. At its heart lay the valley of echoing footsteps, named not in legend, but in truth, because here, time whispered back. Each footfall sent ripples through the soil, not just sound, but memory vibrations. They shimmered faintly under her boots like invisible ink revealed in moonlight. Elara knelt and pressed her palm into the earth. The ground responded. A wave of warmth spread up her fingers as the valley shared its tale. A herd of stegosaurs, slow and solemn, marched across the ancient terrain, their tails swaying to a rhythm only they could hear, like dancers tracing the first music of the planet. With each step Elara took, new echoes arose. A pterosaur gliding low, wings stretched like sails of sunlight, casting shadows that made the trees tremble with awe. A tiny compsognathus chasing fireflies, leaping through golden mist that once shimmered over these same hills. But then, a deeper echo. One not of footsteps, but of a heartbeat. A great one. A slow, ancient, sorrowful beat. She followed it. Past petrified ferns and nests made of woven vines, until she reached a hill of black stone. It looked like volcanic rock at first, but then she saw the patterns. Carved. Spiraled. Etched into the surface in circles that radiated outward like sound waves. Elara held out the time lantern, and as it glowed, the spirals began to turn, not physically, but in memory. She stepped onto the hill. And the past awakened. Around her, light shimmered and formed into a vision, a vast gathering of dinosaurs. Not wild, chaotic herds, but creatures gathered in peaceful silence. In the center stood a single towering being, not the biggest or fiercest, but the oldest. A dinosaur with silvery blue eyes, scales dulled by age, and a glowing stone hanging from its neck. It opened its mouth, and sang. But it was not a sound. It was a memory shared through time. We sang to the stars, the vision said, though no words were spoken. We left stories in the stones, melodies in our footsteps. Not for survival, but for company. Elara felt tears sting her eyes. You found us, the voice continued. And now, we walk with you. The image faded, but something lingered, not a ghost, not a hologram. A presence. A soft thump in the ground. Another heartbeat. Her own, now sinking with the echoes of theirs. She understood now. This valley was not a place of extinction. It was a resonance chamber, a sacred amphitheater where the dreams of the dinosaurs were still being broadcast through the soil, like lullabies humming through the layers of time. The time lantern shimmered in her hand, and a new symbol appeared on its base, the spiral of sound. Of memory. Of return. And Elara whispered. You're not gone. You're still singing. She turned to leave the valley, but not alone. With each step she took, the echoes no longer faded, they walked beside her, as if ancient souls had joined her journey. The stars above trembled. And in the distance, a new sky path unfurled, leading her toward the next dream. The cave of painted shadows. The path from the valley of echoing footsteps narrowed into a winding canyon, its walls rising like ancient pages from a book long forgotten. Elara followed the soft hum of the time lantern, whose glow grew brighter with every careful step. The earth here was layered, dusty reds, golden browns, shimmering blues, like time itself had melted into color. After what felt like hours, the canyon opened into a clearing surrounded by jagged rock. At the center, half hidden behind cascading vines, stood the entrance to a cave. Not wide and grand, but small, almost shy, like it hadn't been visited in thousands of years. Etched above the entrance was a symbol, a handprint inside a spiral. She touched it. The stone warmed under her fingers, and the vines slowly parted. Inside, darkness folded around her. But the moment the time lantern's light reached the cave walls, the shadows moved. They weren't empty silhouettes. They were memories made visible, painted not with pigment, but with fossilized starlight trapped in crystals embedded in the stone. The walls came alive with ancient scenes, like a silent cinema carved in time. There was a forest, towering cycads and feathered fronds waving in slow motion. There were dinosaurs gathering, not to hunt or flee, but to listen. In the center of the mural, a group of small, bird-like dinosaurs perched near glowing stones, their eyes closed in serene focus. Then the scene changed, the crystals shifted their angles subtly, and the light revealed another layer underneath. This time, it showed a comet burning across the sky. But unlike the fearful tales told in human textbooks, this comet was not destruction. It was invitation. The dinosaurs looked up. They reached toward the stars. Elara stepped deeper inside. As she passed each scene, the time lantern hummed with recognition, tuning itself to the frequencies hidden in the crystals. At the far end of the cave, where the shadows were thickest, the light revealed the final image, and Elara gasped. It showed a human figure, cloaked in stars, holding the time lantern. Around them stood the dinosaurs, not painted as creatures of the past, but as guides. Each one with luminous eyes, shimmering with galaxies, their tails curled in protective arcs around the figure. The listener, whispered a voice, not aloud, but within her mind. Elara turned in place. No one was there. The one who stayed awake long enough to hear. The cave was not just a gallery. It was an ancient interface, a living archive storing not just images but intentions. Every shadow, every glow was a message, not from dinosaurs to dinosaurs, but from them to someone like her. A dreamer. A listener. A scientist who never stopped wondering. She reached forward and placed the time lantern in a carved stone slot beneath the final mural. The light pulsed, once, twice, and then poured upward like liquid gold, bathing the walls. The cave changed again. Now the images moved. They showed the dinosaurs not vanishing, but slipping into light. A migration not through space, but through time's forgotten folds, where stars and memory met. It wasn't extinction. It was evolution through dreaming. And now, they were calling her forward. A new tunnel revealed itself at the base of the mural, narrow, glowing softly. A path only visible to one who had listened long enough. Ilara retrieved the time lantern, its glow changed again, now tinted with comet blue. She stepped toward the tunnel. Outside, the comet from the painting had begun to reappear in the sky, distant, real, whispering. The chamber of celestial bones. The tunnel was narrow, carved by time itself, not tools. Ilara ducked low, the rough stone brushing her shoulders as she moved deeper, the time lantern held ahead like a fragile promise. Every so often, the walls pulsed with faint bioluminescence, soft patterns, like ripples of memories that refused to die. The deeper she went, the quieter the world became. No wind. No birdsong. Only breath. Then, the tunnel widened. She stepped into a circular cavern where the air shimmered with stillness. The ceiling rose high above her, like the inside of a cathedral made of stone and stardust. And there, arranged in perfect spirals, were fossils. Not just bones. But glowing, whispering bones. Each fossil was cradled in crystal, suspended midair in fields of invisible magnetism. They hovered like constellations frozen in mid-dance. Some were small, delicate jawbones of bird-like raptors, their teeth still sharp. Others were enormous, ribs like the arches of ancient temples, skulls broader than thrones. Ilara stepped forward, breath shallow. The time lantern flared softly, and a single fossil, a curved claw from a theropod, began to resonate. And then it spoke. Not in words. Not in sounds. But in emotion. A wave of memory passed through her, heat, the thrill of a jungle hunt, the awareness of scales brushing leaves, the scent of rain. Then another fossil pulsed, a frilled crest from a ceratopsian. And another, a vertebra from a long-necked sauropod. Each one offered a moment, a thought, a feeling, a dream, from a world long gone. They weren't remains. They were recordings. The chamber of celestial bones was a library of living echoes, storing not facts, but emotions. It held how the dinosaurs felt when the comet approached. How they dreamed. How they listened. We remembered the stars, came a deep feeling. We felt the rhythm of space. We left, not through rockets, but through wonder. Ilara moved between the floating fossils, tears rising to her eyes. They hadn't been primitive beasts. They had been intelligent in a different way, not with wires and numbers, but with dreams and symphonies of instinct. They felt the universe as song, and followed it home. The final spiral led her to a raised platform in the center. There sat the skull of a small, bird-like dinosaur, no larger than a hawk. Its eyes, still glimmering with starlight caught in crystal, looked straight at her. The time lantern responded instantly, projecting a ring of light that danced across the cavern ceiling, and there, like a planetarium built by the cosmos itself, the sky came alive. She saw Earth, ancient and blue. She saw the comet, not a threat, but a guide. And beyond it, a constellation shaped like a dinosaur's eye. "We are there," said the feeling. "In the constellation you call Phoenix. And we have always watched the dreamers." Suddenly, the lantern pulsed brighter than ever before. From the skull, a final signal emerged, not outward, but into her. A star map. A frequency. A location. The dinosaurs hadn't vanished. They had migrated. And now, they were ready to return. Ilara staggered back, the lantern dimming in her hand. Her heart thundered. Her eyes wide. She looked again at the ceiling, at the stars she thought she had known. They were waiting. The chamber was silent once more. But her mission had changed. She wasn't just a dreamer now. She was the messenger. And far above the earth, in a constellation shaped like a phoenix rising, something had just awakened. The dreamer returns. The chamber of celestial bones was fading behind her, but Alara could still feel it pulsing beneath her skin, the memories, the emotions, the soft star map etched now into her mind. With the time lantern glowing in comet blue and the rhythm of the dinosaurs' dreams echoing faintly in her chest, she began the long ascent out of the cave. The path was quieter now, reverent. No birds called. No leaves stirred. It was as if even the forest around her had paused to listen. As she stepped through the canyon's mouth and into the forest clearing once again, Alara noticed something strange. The trees seemed to be leaning ever so slightly toward her. Their leaves shimmered like scales in moonlight. The ground beneath her feet felt more alive than before, like the land itself recognized her. She wasn't alone anymore. Everywhere she walked, something unseen followed. Not a presence of fear, but of watchfulness. The kind of attention a parent gives a child taking their first steps home. And then, it happened. A shape moved in the trees behind her. Quiet, careful, tall. Alara froze. Slowly, she turned. At first, it looked like mist. Then, a shimmer of light, a ripple, like heat rising from stone. And then, from the shadows of an ancient fern, a silhouette stepped forward. It was tall, slender, feathered in shimmering midnight hues. Its eyes glowed like starlight reflected in still water. It was a dinosaur. But not like any she had seen before. This one was different, delicate and ancient, and yet impossibly new. A being caught between time and possibility. It blinked slowly, not with confusion, but with recognition. "You heard us," came the feeling. Not a voice, not a word, just a deep warmth that settled in her mind like sunlight through fog. Alara swallowed, her hand trembling slightly as she raised the time lantern. It glowed softly in reply. A pulse of comet light, and the dinosaur tilted its head, curiously, kindly. It stepped closer. Not as a beast. Not as a threat. But as a messenger, just like her. Behind it, other shapes stirred. In the mist. Smaller ones. A group of four-legged creatures with bright, curious eyes. Feathered ones perched in the trees, their plumage glittering with iridescent flecks. The air filled with gentle sounds, like a forest remembering its first lullabies. She realized then. The chamber had awakened more than her. It had called them back. They were not ghosts. Not illusions. But echoes made real, drawn back through time by wonder, memory, and her own dreaming. Alara stood very still. And then slowly, gently, she sat down on the forest floor. The dinosaur came closer, and lowered its long neck until its forehead gently brushed hers. And in that moment, her mind was filled with images. Not language, but understanding. She saw a starship, ancient, organic, built from asteroid shell and comet dust. She saw dinosaurs curled inside it, not dead, but sleeping. She saw their exodus, the choice to leave Earth, not in fear, but in hope. And she saw them watching, waiting, until a dreamer with a lantern of light opened the door home again. The moment passed. The creature stepped back, and Alara stood, a little taller, a little changed. She turned toward the distant observatory, where this journey had begun, and knew that she had to return there, to send the final signal. To complete the reply. The dinosaurs would help her now. Not as beasts of the past. But as guardians of a shared future. The observatory awakens. The path to the observatory had never felt so different. Alara wasn't just walking back to a building, she was carrying a message, ancient, luminous, and pulsing with the heartbeat of creatures who had once ruled the earth, and still remembered how to dream. As she climbed the winding trail up the starlit ridge, the wind carried new scents: fern, rain, something warm and mineral, almost prehistoric. And all around her, faint rustles, flutters, and low, melodic hums echoed softly in the underbrush. The dinosaurs, those gentle guardians of time, were following. Not as a stampede, but as a silent escort. Watching. Waiting. When Alara reached the observatory, it stood like a memory carved into stone, familiar and unfamiliar all at once. But something had changed. The domed ceiling shimmered faintly in the dark, as if stardust had settled on its surface. The door creaked open easily this time, as though the building itself had sensed her return. Inside, the control room felt warmer. Not in temperature, but in presence. Her old telescope stood patiently in its cradle, pointed upward. Her journals were right where she had left them, open to a page with a sketch of a spiral galaxy and the caption: "What if they never left us? What if they're just waiting?" Alara smiled gently. It felt like another version of herself had written that, a younger, more uncertain Alara. The one who stared up at the sky wondering if she was the only one dreaming. Now, she knew better. With slow, reverent movements, she placed the glowing time lantern on the console beside her, and its light softly spilled across the floor, casting dancing shapes of ancient forests, stars, and slumbering giants. She turned on the signal array. The satellite dish groaned as it reoriented, searching the skies for the same point in the stars where the first mysterious transmission had once whispered through. But this time, Alara wasn't sending a question. She was sending an answer. She pressed a single glowing key, and the observatory thrummed with low, harmonic resonance. The frequency wasn't static. It was melodic. It was the lullaby of a world remembering itself. From behind her, soft footsteps approached. She turned. In the doorway stood a young dinosaur, no taller than a deer, feathered in silvery down, eyes wide with gentle curiosity. Behind it, more followed. Raptors with iridescent crests, long-necked juveniles, and tiny ones that chirped like wind chimes. The observatory was no longer a human space. It was a bridge. Alara knelt, holding out a hand, and the young dinosaur touched it, its skin cool and smooth, like polished bark. A pulse of understanding passed between them. Together, they looked up at the stars. "It's time," she whispered, her voice trembling with hope. Outside, the satellite dish began to hum. The transmission began. But it wasn't just data. It was a symphony. Images, dreams, feelings. The knowledge of Earth, its beauty, its creatures, its music and mystery, carried upward like a glowing seed into the universe. And somewhere, far beyond the Milky Way, something stirred. A reply. Not loud. Not immediate. But clear. "We remember." Alara felt tears rise, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming, impossible joy. The dinosaurs around her sang, not with mouths, but through presence. A harmony that vibrated through the bones of the earth. A chorus of memory and reunion. The stars had whispered. And now, Earth had whispered back. The song of the constellations. The days that followed the transmission felt like a dream blooming in slow motion. Alara remained in the observatory, now transformed into something more than a science outpost. It had become a sanctuary, a meeting ground for two worlds once thought to be separated by extinction, now reunited under starlight and song. The dinosaurs came daily. They didn't just arrive, they participated. With every passing sunrise, Alara discovered more: how they reacted to constellations, how they seemed to hum in harmony when the stars reached certain alignments, how their very presence stirred dormant instruments within the observatory that had long since fallen silent. One morning, as a deep purple fog rolled off the ridge, a low vibration thrummed through the floor. The time lantern flared a brilliant blue, casting auroras on the walls. Outside, every dinosaur turned toward the sky in unison, as if summoned by something ancient and sacred. Then came the sound, faint at first. A long, shimmering tone. It wasn't from Earth. Elara rushed to the control panel. Her fingers trembled as she filtered the signal. It wasn't just noise. It was structured. Melodic. A song. The pattern matched the exact harmonic frequency of Earth's oldest fossils. The bones of dinosaurs. It was as if the signal was using Earth's own evolutionary echoes to speak, not in words, but in resonance. She played it aloud. The dinosaurs responded. The smaller ones chirped and sang. The larger ones rumbled deep, subsonic notes that shook the windows but never broke them. It was a chorus of life responding to a call they had waited millennia to hear. And then, the time lantern glowed with a new symbol, an unfolding spiral galaxy, with a comet racing toward its center. "They're coming," Elara whispered, heart pounding. "Whoever heard us, they're coming." That night, she stood on the hilltop beside her feathered companion, a young raptor she had come to call Nairo. The sky above was clearer than it had ever been. Every star looked sharper, closer. Alive. And then she saw it. A shimmer. Like heat waves through velvet. A shape, distant, but unmistakable. Not a star. Not a satellite. A ship. Not descending, but circling. As if watching. Elara's breath caught. She didn't feel fear. Only awe. Behind her, the dinosaurs gathered. Shoulder to shoulder. Quiet. Reverent. They were not just waiting. They were remembering. The observatory lights dimmed as the song from the stars grew louder. The dish rotated once more, not by human command, but as if following a script written long before humans arrived. Then the time lantern blinked once. Twice. And projected something into the night sky. A holographic constellation, of a planet. Blue. Familiar. Earth. And above it, a glowing inscription in a language Elara had never seen, but instantly understood. "Welcome back, children of Earth." Her knees gave way. Tears flowed freely. They weren't alone. They never had been. The visitors above the canopy. That night, the forest didn't sleep. The leaves whispered more urgently, the wind carried unfamiliar scents, and the starlight seemed to bend ever so slightly, like the sky was leaning closer, listening. Elara sat beside the time lantern, her eyes fixed on the flickering hologram hovering just above the grass, Earth surrounded by a spiral of stars, and the glowing words, "Welcome back, children of Earth." She barely blinked. Around her, the dinosaurs formed a quiet circle. The massive hadrosaurs lay curled like gentle mountains, their eyes soft with calm. Tiny compsognathuses clustered near her boots, chirping softly, while Nairo, the young raptor, stood tall, scanning the sky with sharp, knowing eyes. And then came the hum. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't a sound at all, really, it was a feeling. A pressure in her bones. Like gravity shifting sideways. The sky opened. From behind a band of cirrus clouds, a triangular silhouette emerged, smooth, glowing with a soft bioluminescence, and utterly silent. No engines. No exhaust. Just presence. Elara's breath caught. The time lantern responded instantly, projecting symbols in the air, waves, stars, echoes. As if trying to translate emotions into images. The ship hovered above the canopy, casting no shadow but filling the air with a gentle warmth. Lights along its underbelly began to pulse in rhythmic patterns. Morse? No, older. Deeper. As though it was speaking to the planet itself, not just the humans upon it. Elara placed her hand on the time lantern. "Can you talk to them?" she whispered. A small sphere of light emerged from the device and drifted upward, pulsing with the same frequency. It rose, hovered, then zipped toward the ship like a messenger bird. The dinosaurs stirred but did not flee. It was as if they understood that what was coming was not a threat, but a homecoming. And then it happened. A beam of light gently spiraled down from the craft, not harsh or blinding, but like moonlight caught in rain. It landed not on Elara, but on Nairo. The young raptor stepped forward. The beam surrounded him, but he did not panic. Instead, he stood still, eyes wide with awe. Within the light, his feathers shimmered with unseen colors. His claws softened. His form pulsed briefly, and then the beam dimmed. Nairo turned to Elara. And he spoke. Not in words, but in thoughts. We were not left behind, the voice echoed gently in her mind. We were hidden. Protected. And now, we are remembered. Elara stumbled back. Nairo, how? He stepped forward and nuzzled her arm, the way he always did when seeking reassurance. His gaze was warm, intelligent. Clear. They will come. From the stars. Not to conquer. But to reconnect. You are the bridge, Elara. Between worlds. Between times. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks. The ship began to ascend. The light withdrew. The dinosaurs let out a harmonious sound, a song deeper than any she'd ever heard. It wasn't goodbye. It was a beginning. And high above the canopy, beyond the reach of any telescope, the stars shimmered with ancient memory, and something else. Hope. Secrets of the meteor core. Elara barely slept. Not that night. Not after Nairo had spoken, not with words, but with a consciousness ancient and aching and full of wisdom. The others had returned to the nest, drifting to sleep under the silver canopy of stars, but Elara sat beside the time lantern and stared into the deep forest, heart thundering like a distant drum. She replayed Nairo's thought speech in her mind again and again. We were not left behind. We were hidden. What did that mean? Hidden from what? From whom? Morning came with golden mist curling through the trees. Dew clung to fern-fringed leaves like tiny stars, and somewhere a distant Parasaurolophus sang its lonely, flute-like cry. But Elara had no time to admire the view. The time lantern blinked to life just before dawn, showing a new map, not a star chart, but something beneath her feet. A buried object. Deep beneath the roots of the valley. A meteor. No, not just a meteor. A core. With shaking hands, she followed the lantern's guidance into the heart of the jungle, Nairo silently padding beside her. He had not spoken again, not even through thought, but his eyes followed her every movement, curious and alert. Hours passed as they descended a slope laced with fossilized trees and amber-glazed rocks. At last, they reached a wide clearing. The ground here was different, cracked, scorched, and humming faintly. This is it, she breathed. The lantern hovered above the center and then plunged downward like a drill of light. The earth responded, crumbling, opening, revealing a hollow chamber lined with shimmering crystal. At its center, a sphere. Glassy. Pulsing with faint blue light. And surrounded by something extraordinary, fossils of long-dead creatures, perfectly preserved in a circle around it, as though they had gathered here in reverence before death. Elara stepped closer. The sphere responded to her presence. It warmed. Shifted. And then. It spoke. Not in sound. But like Nairo had, in thought, in memory. This is not a weapon, the voice said. It is a time seed. Planted when the great fire fell from the sky. To keep memory safe. We have watched Earth sleep. We have watched it forget. But now it is dreaming again. Elara fell to her knees, overwhelmed. Around her, the crystal walls shimmered with visions, of Earth millions of years ago, of creatures now extinct walking beneath alien stars, of beings, not human, watching over them from space like distant guardians. This core, this sphere, it wasn't just ancient. It was alive. It had witnessed the end of the dinosaurs. And now, it offered a choice. Revive the memory, or let it fade forever. Nairo stood at her side, one clawed hand gently resting on her shoulder. You are the key, Elara, his thoughts whispered. The first voice in an age of silence. Will you help Earth remember? Elara nodded. And the sphere began to open. Inside was not fire. Not destruction. But a map made of light. A star path. A return signal. A countdown. And at the center of it all. A heartbeat. The map of memory. The chamber pulsed with pale blue light, casting shifting patterns across Elara's wide eyes and Nairo's gleaming scales. The time lantern hovered above the core sphere like a hummingbird frozen in time, its light resonating with the heartbeat inside the orb. But this was no ordinary heartbeat. It was rhythmic, celestial, as though it pulsed with the breath of the universe. The map revealed inside the core was not just a star chart, it was a layered, multidimensional sequence of locations, memories, and time signatures. Constellations rearranged themselves, forming ancient landmasses. Then they shifted, revealing meteor impact zones, magnetic anomalies, and buried fossils glowing like embers. These are not just coordinates, Elara whispered. They're memory imprints. Nairo tilted his head, the light dancing across the ridges of his horns. His thoughts came softly. Places where time still breathes. Elara reached toward the map. As her fingers touched the light, a ripple spread through the holographic pattern, and suddenly, the room dissolved into an illusion so real she gasped. She was standing on the edge of a massive cliff, overlooking a primeval sea lit by twin moons. Dinosaurs moved in herds across glowing grasslands. Above them, floating ships, not human, hovered silently, their hulls carved with swirling symbols. She turned. Beside her stood a figure, not Nairo, not a dinosaur, but tall and strange. Cloaked in stars, its face hidden beneath layers of shimmer and shadow. It extended a long hand and touched her forehead. Suddenly, Elara understood. This place had been visited. Long ago. By beings who saw Earth not as an experiment, but as a seed world, one of many. And when they sensed catastrophe coming, a planet-ending event, they placed time seeds in hidden pockets across the globe. This core was one of them. A vessel of biological memory, time-mapped DNA, and a final message. One day, they will return. But first, you must remember who walked this world before you. With a shudder, Elara was pulled back into the crystal chamber. The map had changed. New lines glowed brightly, showing the locations of 3 other cores, buried deep in forgotten places. One beneath the frozen tundra of a lost Arctic forest. One inside a dormant volcano at the edge of the South Sea. And one, orbiting above Earth itself. A satellite seed, long powered down. She looked at Nairo. He nodded, solemnly. The journey is not finished. The memory must be awakened in full. Or the cycle will begin again, without you. Elara knew what she had to do. This wasn't about science anymore. It was about truth. And the future of both the past and what lay ahead. She looked up at the forest canopy above the crystal chamber. And whispered, "We're not just exploring time anymore, are we?" Nairo's eyes shimmered in the glow of the map. "No. We're rebuilding it. The forest that remembers." The path leading away from the crystal chamber felt different now. The forest no longer whispered in mystery, it spoke in memory. Elara and Nairo walked slowly through the ancient woods, the air thick with unseen currents of time. The trees seemed older, taller, and somehow more aware. Their leaves shimmered faintly in the dark, as if they were remembering things too. The time lantern floated quietly above Alara's shoulder, projecting pale silver threads into the air, each thread tracing a memory encoded in the roots, bark, and stone of the earth. As the lantern pulsed, Alara saw flashes of long-lost scenes playing across the forest around her like transparent dreamscapes. A herd of ceratopsians drinking from a glowing river. A meteor cutting across a lavender sky, long before human eyes ever opened. A massive feathered dinosaur curled around its eggs, humming a lullaby into the wind. "Time is deep here," Alara whispered. "It never really leaves." Nairo stepped ahead of her and paused beneath a great tree with bark so dark it looked like obsidian. His tail flicked gently. "This is the forest of remembering," he said softly, his voice like warm breath on frost. "One of the first places the stars ever touched." Suddenly, the lantern brightened, not in warning, but in invitation. Before them, the tree's trunk split apart, revealing a hollow chamber within. It was no natural cavity. Inside the tree was a staircase, spiraling downward, carved of root and fossil, lit with a soft, amber glow. Without hesitation, Alara stepped forward. Each step downward was a step backward in time. Whispers echoed all around her, not of language, but of instinct. Ancient lullabies. Warnings. Laughs. The first time a creature dreamed. The first time a mother sang. When she reached the bottom, she stood in a hollow of memory. It wasn't just a room, it was a living archive. The roots of the tree connected to the earth like neurons to a cosmic brain. Floating orbs drifted in the air, each one containing a preserved moment from prehistory. And then she saw it, a pedestal of stone and light. On it rested a shard. A fragment of something once whole. The second time seed core. When she reached for it, the roots responded, curling protectively around it. Alara placed her palm gently on the bark and whispered, "I'm not here to take. I'm here to remember." The roots slowly receded. The shard lifted itself into the air and merged with the time lantern. The forest above trembled, not in fear, but in recognition. Something ancient had awakened. The stars outside pulsed in rhythm. And in the silence, Nairo whispered what Alara was thinking. 2 more cores remain. And the truth is growing louder. The volcano that hummed. As the forest of memory faded behind them, the path ahead twisted into cracked red rock, steaming vents, and the low rumble of something ancient breathing below. The time lantern, now holding 2 of the 4 time seed cores, pulsed with a nervous rhythm. Alara adjusted her starlight scarf and stepped cautiously onto the scorched trail. Beside her, Nairo moved slowly, his nostrils twitching at the sharp tang of sulfur in the air. "This is Fireback Crater," he said. "No dinosaur enters here unless it has forgotten fear." But Alara was no ordinary visitor. And she had not forgotten fear, she had learned to walk beside it. As they approached the base of the ancient volcano, a deep humming filled the ground beneath their feet. It wasn't just tremor, it was music. Low, rhythmic, resonant. Like the volcano was, humming to itself. The entrance appeared in the black stone, a crack wide enough for a human and a raptor to enter side by side. Inside, the walls were carved with markings, not from claw or tool, but from heat and light. Ancient pictographs shimmered faintly, showing winged beasts and glowing seeds falling from the sky. "It's been waiting," Nairo said softly. The deeper they went, the warmer the air grew. Streams of molten gold flowed through channels in the floor like glowing veins. And there, at the very heart of the volcano, stood an obsidian pedestal. Floating above it, the 3rd time seed core, surrounded by rings of pure flame. But something else was there too. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike anything Alara had seen. It was a flame watcher, an ancient, long-extinct guardian species, part serpent, part bird, part ember. Its feathers glowed like coals. Its eyes flickered like candlelight. Elara bowed slowly. I seek only to restore what was lost. The flame watcher tilted its head. Then it sang. Its voice was fire and sorrow. A language of smoke and memory. The time lantern rose from Elara's shoulder and answered with a hum of its own, echoing the melody. Slowly, the ring of fire around the core parted like petals. And the third core descended into her hands, warm and bright. But the volcano trembled again. The flame watcher looked toward the ceiling of magma-lit stone and whispered one final word. Awakened. Suddenly, the volcano roared, not in anger, but in alarm. Far below, something enormous had stirred. And Elara understood, she had not gone unnoticed. Something was watching the search for the time seeds. Something that did not want the past to be remembered. The sea beneath the sky. The time lantern glowed softly in Elara's palm, now cradling 3 of the 4 shimmering time seed cores. Each one pulsed with a rhythm older than memory, as if awakening forgotten tides in the world. Nairo walked beside her in thoughtful silence, his sleek tail swaying with caution. The volcano behind them still hummed, echoing with the lingering music of the flame watcher. Now, their path stretched eastward, toward the shore of an ancient inland sea known only in the whispers of the oldest dinosaurs, the Mirror Ocean. At first glance, it was a quiet, endless lake, its surface as still as glass. But when Elara held the lantern toward the water, the reflection showed 2 moons in the sky. Not one. This is it, she whispered. Time folds here. Nairo nodded. The last core rests beneath the waves. But the Mirror Ocean is no place for landwalkers. You'll need help. He let out a low, melodic call, and from the thick ferns by the shore emerged a strange and wonderful creature. Sleek as a seal, with fins like velvet sails and eyes full of stars, a chronophon, one of the few creatures that could swim between time layers. Its name was Selu, and she had been waiting. Elara climbed onto Selu's back, the time lantern secured to her chest, glowing steadily. As they sank into the waters, the surface did not ripple, it shimmered, like slipping through a mirror. Beneath, the world was not the same. There were ruins on the sea floor, pillars and arches and stone structures carved with spirals of stars. Strange bioluminescent creatures drifted past like living constellations. And high above them, time itself appeared as slow-moving streams of light, curling around the ruins like vines. Then she saw it, a sunken observatory, long swallowed by coral and silt, resting in the center of the ruins. Inside its hollow dome floated the 4th and final time seed core, spinning slowly in zero gravity. But they weren't alone. From the shadows came a deep groan. Something massive stirred in the dark. A pair of eyes opened like twin lanterns, ancient, watching, judging. It was a Titanus deepjaw, a prehistoric guardian of the ocean's memory. Older than even the flame watcher. It had been left behind by the first builders to protect this place. It began to circle them. Selu paused. Elara placed a hand on the time lantern. We're not here to take. Only to remember. The lantern shone, casting ripples of light across the broken observatory. In the glow, images danced, memories of the past, dinosaurs speaking. Under starlight, building tools, watching comets. The deep jaw stopped. Then it bowed. And the 4th core floated gently toward Elara, its glow uniting with the other 3. The lantern hummed, brighter, deeper, more complete than ever before. But just as they turned to leave, something dark cracked across the sky above the water. A rift. Like a tear in the heavens. Time itself was beginning to break. The tear in the sky. The waters of the Mirror Ocean rippled unnaturally as Elara and Selu emerged, gliding onto the silver-blue shore under a sky that no longer felt calm. Above them, a jagged tear in time had opened, like someone had taken a needle and pierced the heavens. Through the rippling breach, ghost images of the future flickered and bled into the present, gleaming cities collapsing into vines, stars reversing their spin, machines walking alongside trees, and strange creatures, not dinosaur, not human, screaming without mouths. The lantern pulsed wildly, as if frightened. Nairo stood at the shoreline, jaw clenched. "It has begun," he said gravely. "The time weave is unraveling." Elara stepped off Selu's back, her hands trembling but sure. "The lantern has all 4 cores now. Isn't it supposed to stabilize time?" "It is," Nairo said. "But something older than the lantern is pulling the threads loose. And it's coming from beyond the tear." Just then, the tear widened, and a shape began to descend through it, slowly, like a falling leaf made of shadow and starlight. A celestial warden. Ancient, mechanical, yet breathing, an enormous being once thought only a myth, created by the first builders to guard the edges of time. Its wings spread like constellations, its eyes glowed with calculations. The ground shook as it spoke, not in words, but in memory. Elara saw flashes of history, too fast to hold, a lost library deep beneath the earth, the first builders crafting stars, dinosaurs leaving messages in meteorite stone, a lighthouse floating in space. The warden turned its gaze to Elara. "You carry the last light," it whispered into her mind. "But time has diverged. A fracture was born the day the lantern first lit. You must choose the strand to follow." "What does that mean?" Elara asked aloud. "Choose how? What choice?" Suddenly, the time lantern split open like a flower in her hands, revealing a map made of light and breath, not a place, but possibilities. Nairo stepped forward, his tail twitching. "I know this legend. The lantern doesn't just record time. It decides." They watched as the glowing strands of the future writhed above them, one where dinosaurs never vanished, one where humans lived beneath the oceans, one where Earth was abandoned, and one where the stars fell silent forever. And at the center, one single thread, blinking gently. The true timeline. But it was fading. "You must enter the tear," the warden said, lowering one long, starlit limb. "And restore what was broken before the first dawn is lost." Elara looked up, heart pounding, the time lantern glowing like a sun in her chest. She took Nairo's hand. "I'm ready." Then she stepped into the light. The thread of the first dawn. As Elara crossed the threshold into the tear in the sky, she felt herself unravel and reform in a single breath, not as one being, but as all her versions across time. A child staring at stars. A scientist chasing comets. A dreamer lost in forgotten futures. The world on the other side was unlike anything she had ever known. It wasn't a place. It was time made visible, a great woven tapestry floating in the void, threads of gold, violet, and starlight dancing endlessly, stretching into eternity. Each strand pulsed with the rhythm of an era, the heartbeat of an extinct sea, the rustle of ancient forests, the thunder of meteors. There were timelines where dinosaurs evolved into thinkers, where humans rode on thunder lizards, and others where neither had ever existed. Some were broken, some too tangled to follow, others fraying at the edge. And there, in the center, hovered the thread of the first dawn. It shimmered like a song. But it was fading. Elara stood before it, with the time lantern cradled in her hands like a living heart. Nairo stood beside her, though his form flickered. Here, in this place beyond logic, even he was becoming part story, part spirit. "The thread is breaking," he said, voice hollowed by awe. "If it vanishes, all paths will collapse into chaos." A soft hum stirred the fabric of the void. From behind the great tapestry, something moved, slow and deliberate. The Unmaker. It was neither creature nor machine. It was entropy made form, the ancient force that unspooled stars, dissolved civilizations, and devoured memory. It had no face, no voice. Just presence. Cold. Final. It reached toward the thread of the first dawn. Elara gripped the lantern. "I have to bind it back." "But you can't do it alone," whispered a voice, soft, familiar. From the threads, shadows began to step forth. Dinosaurs, not from her world but from other versions of it, armored dreamers, feathered philosophers, guardians with glowing bones. Each held a shard of memory, of wisdom long lost. And then came the humans, past and future, stargazers, time-walkers, and ancient astronomers whose names had been forgotten by the world. They stood with her. Time itself was answering her call. Elara opened the lantern, and the four cores pulsed in unison: light, memory, instinct, and harmony. She took the lantern's light and began weaving, slowly, gently, her fingers glowing with knowledge not learned, but remembered from the very first spark of time. She wove the first dawn thread back into place. The unmaker hissed, recoiling from the light. It lashed out, but the assembled souls, dinosaur and human, stardust and story, formed a shield of resonance, echoing the oldest lullaby ever sung, existence. With one final knot, Elara pulled the thread tight. The tapestry glowed. Every timeline shimmered, realigned, and breathed anew. Balance. Beauty. Continuity. The unmaker faded into silence, its work undone. And then, a hush. A silence so vast and perfect it felt like peace. Nairo turned to Elara. "You did it." "No," she said softly, watching the threads shimmer. "We did." The time lantern closed, now a perfect sphere of starlight. The tear in the sky began to heal, threading itself closed with the strength of restored possibility. One by one, the beings of other timelines bowed and faded, returning to their rightful threads. Elara and Nairo were pulled gently backward, through time, through light, through dream, until they stood once more on the shores of the mirror ocean. Everything was calm. The sky clear. The stars whispered with gratitude. Selu let out a low trill, nudging Elara gently. She smiled and held the lantern close. "The story's not over," she whispered. "It's just beginning again." And far above, on the very edge of the stars, a new comet blinked awake, and began its journey home.